Come forward. I hear you have arrived. Has you've already been introduced pretty thoroughly by Megan. He was late today because of the kind of person that he is. He had to stop and visit some people who had been in an accident and were at Harborview Hospital. So thank you for coming and look forward to hearing from you. He's the business agent for IBEW Local 77.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. The triad was who I worked with. I know Kathleen came in a little bit later into the program to kind of, be nasty. And nasty's good. I was over at the CSRs and they said, we're nasty. I said, I want you to be nasty. This is what I want. I want a nasty union. I want people to be able to stand up. We have to, do our thing and make things happen too. But, Terry Bach, and I've told this story before. Terry worked on the line crew, stayed out there quite a bit, and I remember that somebody had told, I just heard the story, so I didn't witness it, but somebody asked her what her sexuality was, and she said it was irrelevant. And I will tell you that I don't know if I would have had the courage to say that. I would have staked out my ground. But Terry was right, it's irrelevant. And we're finding out more and more today with regards to what's happening not only in the nation, the world, and within, just labor unions and such, okay? I don't know if I got a story about you, Megan. I know that I always like going down there to the Power Control Center, and to me, it was kind of a social event. I was a line crew foreman, crew chief, and so we had to arrange all our clearances and stuff like that, and it was always a joy to go down there. Heidi worked with us, and I learned to, when you're in the union, you're a business rep or leader, and I'm the business manager, so everybody works for me now. I'm the big kahuna. And so, but I go there and I would say, how can I use this person? Okay, let's make how can I use this person? And can I deal with that? I grew to really care, love, and enjoy Heidi's company. And she worked with us, and I'll tell you, just like everything. And I know her loyalties to the Socialist Freedom Group and all that other stuff, and whether I agree with every one of the tenets of that issue, she always was IBW. Yep, that's right. She was always IBW. And so, we have what we call the Electrical Workers Minority Caucus, which is going to actually meets over Martin Luther King. We're going to be in New York City this year. And that was the thing there. We're not a separation unit. We are an IBW connection, and I respected that. And when we could identify the issues, and she worked with me on that wage adjustment that Simpson finally had to get, which pisses me off because I wanted that glory, but you know how that goes. But anyway, but Heidi was instrumental in that, and we laid the groundwork out and got a lot done. So when I talk about that, it's just, I remember I get invited to these different little events. It was the birthday party? Was it the one we went to last? Yeah, okay, and I went there, and what moved me the most was the fact that she was so glad to see people and to see me. And I was always kind of moved by that she cared that much. And, we did our thing. Talked about the falling off the pole, This was not about, fighting for Heidi. This was pissed me off was, the accident report says she fell because she's a woman. And I'm thinking to myself, one of the highest rates of injury and fatalities in the IBW is people falling off poles. And it hasn't a goddamn thing to do whether they're a woman or a man. That was the bout. But, we had a safety guy, I'm not going to mention his name, but he decided that was going to be his report. And I remember we went to the executive board, and we didn't prevail because autonomy of units, so that bullshit. But anyway, I said, this ain't right. I don't care. It ain't right. It ain't right. And, the accident report should never been about any of that. I remember the pressure to free climb. And Terry, she was diminutive, you know. So it was a pretty big issue for her to be able to go up and climb a pole. But and there's the whole thing, I was a journeyman on the crew, and I says, you know, use a second skid. That's 2 safeties. That means that when you're up there, you're able to have a second point of contact so you can undo one and do the other, and then be able to climb up and safely do that. And the fact I'm just saying is that when you're climbing those poles, they were so large in diameter, you know, you'd be, even me, you know, would have been tough, but I was in the bucket, so I didn't care. But anyway, but I needed her up there, so I said, you know. But I remember the pressure. And I remember, you know, there had to be a tremendous amount of thing about doing what I would consider today would be illegal, but not only that, unsafe, you know, just from a practice standpoint with regards to, you know, climbing things and doing that kind of stuff. And, you know, but Heidi, she taught me so much. The whole idea, you know, there's that religious thing about Jesus curing the blind, you know, spitting in the mud and rubbing it on the eyes. And I have a very good priest friend, because a lot of people take that, and if I offend anybody, I apologize, but that people think that that was a physical miracle. And it could be, you know, I don't know, what do I know? But I will tell you that he pointed out to me that it could have been a spiritual miracle, that we all, and I think everybody in here has gotten either something that you see, something that you engage with, that changes your whole perspective. And I always called that's curing your vision, curing your blindness, because it was easy to be blind. And I'm leading an organization, 7,000 members. I'm part of a larger organization. And we today understand that radicalization and organizing is not something to be afraid of, but something to embrace. We're trying to change ourselves from a transformative, and this goes back to Heidi's help and Megan to tell me, you know, to help me see and put that in the back of my brain, how important it is to be a transformative organization, not necessarily focusing on service, because we do a pretty good job negotiating contracts and economics and stuff like that, but then we become an insurance policy, and there's no feeling in that, last time I checked. Last time, if your insurance company sent you a letter and said, hey, we'd like you to rally down at the, you know, you go, what? It doesn't happen. The other thing, too, that's really important is our ability to be able to have a great community. We have a great educational person. She's sort of my personal muse. Her name is Tracy Prezzo. Tracy works out of the international office, and she talks about member to member. She talks about the importance, which is the same message that you guys talked about, that if we depend on labor within itself, we depend on the IBW. And I remember she'd write on the board, she says, you're in trouble. Who are you going to go to? So I go, you know, we go to IBW International, we go to Labor Council, we go, and she looked at the list. It was all unions, union organizations. And I'll take some liberty here. And she looked at it. And she's a small person, you know. I think actually Terry was a little bit taller, but anyway. And she looked at it and she says, "You are so fucked." And the deal was to outreach, and I actually send people to Netroots Nation, because I want to have those connections with, you know, with NGOs and people who are out there, social justice. And we're all of a sudden starting to talk about that. And my thing is, I just talked to my vice president of our district. We have a hierarchy, obviously, and we're kidding around, but I wasn't. And I said, okay, can I endorse Bernie? Okay. And if there may be a price to pay on that, and you may have somebody else you want to see in that, but, you know, I will tell you that not only does he have 40 years, and once it's political, I didn't mean to do this, I apologize, but it was the thing, everything came out of his mouth I agree with. And I've never had a politician that I felt that way. So what I'm going to do, and it probably may cause some ruffles in the area, but I figured, what the hell, let's go. And I got Shawnee Wheeler's my political director, excuse me, and we're all really into that. You know, city council races. I can't remember, we have No, Swan Eye, yeah, we're all in on that, so that's not a problem. I'm trying to think, I'm sorry, I apologize, I don't know her name, but she was on Nick Licata's staff. What her name? Yeah. And there's an issue, she's running against somebody else. It's a pretty slick campaign. If anybody's in here, I apologize, but I'm gonna be, Heidi and Terry would insist that I at least speak my truth. So anyway, so we're talking and trying to figure this out, and so Shawnee comes up to me and I says, well, what about this? Well, she probably, the polling and the primary, and she's got some difficulty. She has a large hill to climb, but we like her. And I said, if we like her, let's do it. So we're going to, endorse her and put that thing on there because we like what she's saying, who she is and what she's doing out there. She may not win, I don't care, but the idea is that somewhere along the line, we got to identify who the hell we are,
Yes.
We let it lay that. We let somebody else steal our voice. And by doing that, we're advocating our basic essence of who we are and what we should be saying. Whether we all totally agree, but the fact is we have more in common interest if we're representing workers, no matter what size of the spectrum you have, whatever that is. And that's the key thing I tell people is that, and that's the other thing, the thing that helped me, and Heidi helped me, Megan helps me, is the fact that we have more in common. I learned that working with Heidi than we do that separates us. So it was that sense of common interest that was very important. And I always appreciated that. You're running me out of here, aren't you? Okay, thank you.
I hope you can stay around and chat with us more informally during the receptionary time after the program. Next today, we're going to hear from Jeff Johnson, who is a crew chief at Seattle City Light now. He was a co-worker of Heidi's during her time there and shared many experiences and adventures with her. When she became ill and he heard about her illness recently, he contacted the family and let them know how much she meant to him, and we asked him to come and share that with us today. Jeff?
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. I was just a little punch, Lou. Anyway, as was mentioned, my name is Jeff Johnson, and I had the opportunity to work with, not really directly with Heidi, but sort of around Heidi. And but I happen to be one of those persons who was a recipient of the help that you guys described, the things that you guys described earlier in previous your messages, things that Heidi was involved in. I was a recipient of that. Years ago, back in late 80s, around 90, I was an apprentice, and I was kind of having a little bit of a hard time at the time. Had some struggles. At that time, I was involved in some drugs and alcohol, but I was trying to get it right. And so I was trying to clean things up, and I don't even know how I met Heidi. But somehow Heidi management was trying to come after me and trying to impose some discipline on me, and they were really reaching over the top there at City Light. Somehow Heidi got word that these folks were on my back. So Heidi contacted me. She came out of nowhere, and next thing I know, it was her name. I think Kathleen even talked to me too a little bit. But Heidi grabbed a hold of this thing, got the information from me, and took it and run. Told me just sit back, don't say a word. Before that, I had all these. Supposed to have some meeting, with supervisors and all this stuff. I'm like, oh boy, here it is. I'm getting ready to go down. I don't know. Heidi got a hold of it. Next thing I know, some letter went to the union hall, and before I knew it, everything was just squashed. I don't know what she did. I don't know who she talked to. I have an idea how she talked to them, though. But everything was squashed, and from at that point on, I had much admiration for Heidi. Because at that time, we really didn't know each other, but she was just looking out for me and my rights. And personally, I didn't want to let her down, and so I didn't want to let other people down as well, but I think I continued my fight forward as well. And having people like that in your life is always helpful, because we all need help. We all trip up now and then. And it's always good to have somebody alongside you, whether you know them or not, that can come right in there, give you that lift, give you the kick in the butt that you need. Exactly. She happened to be that person for me. So I admired her for that. Now, later on in years, after I became a journey level electrician, and I work in substations, and of course, I had to make phone calls in to Heidi to get a clearance. And for those of you who don't know what a clearance is basically you want to have an outage on a piece of equipment that you want to work on, so you want it de-energized. So, I don't know, I might have been a journeyman a couple years, but right away I had to call in, and I'd call Heidi. Heidi, I need to take a clearance on this disconnect. It's not working. What do you mean it's not working? We can't let you take that out right now. She'd always start going off. I'm like, Lord have mercy. I done woke up a sleeping lion here. Anyway, it was like that every time. She'd kind of come unglued on me, and I was like, okay, I gotta call you back. So anyway, we'd work it out. She'd call back, and we'd get that particular clearance out, and then it'd be time for the next one. I'm like, Lord have mercy, I got to go in here again. It's Heidi. So what I would try to do, I'd say, okay, I'd also knew of Megan. I'm going to try Megan this time. Megan was a little gentler about her nose, But I always still had to come back to Heidi. And even my crew chief at the time, it'd be time to try to, arrange this stuff. And I tell you, he didn't want to do it. He'd always, you got to call, set this up. So what I learned I had to do is I had to sit down and study for a week and figure out, because if you had to have all your I's dotted, your T's crossed when you talk to her. So that's what she'd always catch me on. So actually, again, she helped me to be a little bit more thorough. So anyway, here I am. I'm trying to be thorough. I call it in. I'm all ready to go. I got it all laid out. And what does she do? What do you mean you need that breaker? We just can't take that breaker out right now. We just can't do it. She'd go on and on about that. And once again, Lord, please help me. But anyway, we developed a rapport, and I found out what I needed to do to make Heidi okay. And usually that would just be, especially for the transmission work, that would just be requesting that piece of equipment on the weekend. So if I said, and at that time in our division, we never got to work overtime. We just didn't do it. So as soon as I actually brought that up to Heidi, I tell you what, it's no big deal. Why don't we just do that on the weekend? It worked out. So then I figured out, okay, so that's the ticket. So Heidi made me and others a lot of money. I was always very appreciative of that, but I said that, but she was a fireball, but even though she was being harsh, sometimes she was still being nice and she was still right on point. I just needed to learn how to communicate better. And I think I'm now a better communicator. But anyway, I always appreciated Heidi. I did have the opportunity to see her just a few months ago. I was asked by my sister-in-law and brother-in-law to go with them to look at a place for my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's as well. And so she had been staying in assisted living, and she needed to move on because that wasn't working anymore. She'd had a fall. So we visited Sunrise there in Mercer Island. So there we're there, and I was talking with the tour guide and another person there, and this guy comes up, he starts asking me what do I do, where do I work, and so I say City Light, and right away then the lady says, well, there's a pioneer woman in here. She was a pioneer. And I'm thinking, a pioneer? And then I thought, okay, well I had heard Heidi had Alzheimer's. I'm like, Heidi's in here? And so she said, yeah, she's going to be in the lunchroom. Right now they're having lunch. So actually, we did some more of the tour, we went in the lunchroom, and she says, okay, well Heidi's sitting over there. So there she was, sitting at the table. I let my sister and brother-in-law go ahead and check out the room that they were checking out. I went and talked to Heidi, and I was really sad at the occasion, but I was also happy to be able to see her. So I sat down, even though she wasn't able to put words together, I still tried to engage in some conversation and talk to her and bring up some City Light stuff and how she used to give me this hard time every time on the phone. And so anyway, I left and decided to catch up with the other folks and went around the way in the hallway, but I couldn't get with them because I was so saddened by seeing her in that state and knowing that she is so young. And so I began to weep a little bit in the hallway, and so the person who was running the dining room happened to come out, and she sees me, she says, hey, mister, she says, oh, she says, are you weeping? She says, I said, yeah, just a little. She said, well, Heidi is in there doing the same thing right now. Well, that even touched me even more because I'm like, I just wonder, and I think, I really truly believe that she knew that it was me, she knew of our experience. She couldn't articulate it in any way, but she knew. And that was just special to me. Heidi was a very special lady, and I'm sure she was a very special lady to a lot of people, and she will definitely be missed. And I'm happy to have had the opportunity to, oh, that's okay, go ahead and clap. I'm happy to have had the opportunity to work with her for so many years at City Light, along with Megan and even Kathleen as well. And my condolences out to your family.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeff. Next up is Suki Wolf. She's another one of Heidi's sisters, the one closest to her in age. They've worked together and shared many experiences over the years and shared the same kind of commitments to the politics and to the struggle. Suki's a writer and a poet. She's also worked in the non-traditional trades and as a counselor. And she's reading today a poem that she wrote especially for Heidi.
Actually, this poem was written a little while ago, but it's okay. I just, with, all the memories and everybody talking about Heidi's solidarity, I think she must have developed that with me walking to school. Heidi was always like the older sister. I was the one who was getting in trouble and being kept after school and getting into all kinds of stuff. And Heidi was always very responsible. Well, I had a teacher in the 4th grade named Mrs. Levengood, who we called Mrs. Levenbad because she was so horrible. And the woman just had it in for me. And I spent half the 4th grade consigned to the cloakroom because supposedly for misbehaving, which I was not. And the woman would keep me after school almost every day. And good old Heidi would always hang around every day and wait for me. She would not go home until I was out of detention. And that was just emblematic of who Heidi was. And I sure could have used her when I was working at BART, because there was just one of me in a department of 40 guys. But I was so glad to hear what Lou said, because, you know, you do hope that, you know, you don't actually turn anybody into a feminist maybe, but you open some people's minds. So, and I also would not have survived at BART without the friendship of other workers, particularly the Latino men and the black men. So I had a similar experience to Heidi. This is called Homecoming. How your 3 daughters thought you were dying this time, came home one summer night, meeting in the airport at 3 a.m. to catch another flight up the coast. The airport was nearly deserted, except for the janitors and ticket agents. How the men gawked at us and turned around to watch the big women striding abreast down the empty corridors, talking and laughing, holding ourselves together with no use for them. At dawn, we boarded a small plane and sat in the rear, joking that the door would fall off at any moment. There was no need to hide ourselves or sit humble and diminished, 3 unguarded women trying to pass through the world unnoticed. The wings dipped and we headed out over the ocean, and I thought, Mama, you would be so proud. Thank you.
Thank you, Suki. It's time for some music again, and this time we're going to hear from Leith Call, who is a local musician, longshore worker, member of the ILWU union. He was a member of Teamsters for many years and then was in a Teamster union when he first met Heidi. You'll likely see him playing his banjo and singing powerful songs on picket lines and demonstrations and rallies around Seattle, for which he's well known. And today he's going to perform one of Heidi's favorite songs, which you will all immediately understand the connection when you hear it. It's called It Isn't Nice, and it was written by Malvina Reynolds in 1964.
Thank you. I first met Heidi in late 2000. Oh, can't hear you. I don't know. Oh, on? On. Right, well, I first met Heidi in 2004 at a planning committee for the right, yeah, the Million Worker March, which was something that was unique in that the Democratic Party hadn't given permission for it to happen. And supposedly they weren't saying that it couldn't happen, but a lot of aspects of their machinery were throwing roadblocks in its way to impede it. And so those of us that wanted it to happen, a lot of us met each other at that time around that. Where I feel like I really got to know Heidi better was in the next few years in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. I was on a committee to send relief to New Orleans. Heidi was on it, Fred Hyde, several members of the FSP were on it, and it was really a joy to work with Heidi at that time. Heidi was a very fun person to work with, and very fun to disagree with, because it was always worth arguing with Heidi. Heidi went into every discussion always with the very strong belief that she was right, but never with the dogmatic assumption that she was. She was always willing to consider that she might have overlooked something. Always willing to consider seeing things from another angle, and sometimes she'd convince me, and sometimes I'd convince her, and sometimes we wouldn't convince each other, but we would identify exactly what we disagreed about, so we would know how to work around it. It was always worth arguing with Heidi. Everyone was always better for it, and it always resulted in us being able to move forward. And late 2006, I was on the phone one night arguing with Heidi. And it was a very involved discussion. I'm not going to go into what it was about, but it involved a lot of theory, a lot of praxis, a lot of comparing analysis on where this or that union was going, where this or that leadership formation it was going. And I noticed the argument seemed kind of weird. Seems like instead of going like a usual discussion with Heidi went, we kept repeating the same point. Like usually an argument would move forward. We talked about that and then we'd move forward to this, and it kept going back into a loop. And I said, this seems weird. It seems like we're discussing the same thing over and over again. And that's when she said, that might be because I've just been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. And that was when I first noticed that we're going to start losing this genius woman's faculties. But she stayed strong for a long, long time after that, made a lot more contributions. And I'm glad that I was asked to sing this song, because I think this song does speak to a lot about who Heidi was. It isn't nice to block the doorway. It isn't nice to go to jail. There are nicer ways to do it, but the nice ways always fail. It isn't nice, it isn't nice. You told us once, you told us twice, but if that is freedom's price, we don't mind. We have tried negotiations and the three-man picket line. Mr. Charlie didn't see us, and he might as well be blind. You say that we should be nice when we deal with men of ice, but if this is freedom's price, we don't mind. No, 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 we don't mind. About Sandra Bland's lynching and the shots in Walter's back. Did you say that wasn't proper? Did you stand out on the track? You were quiet just like mice, then you told us to be nice. But if this is freedom's price, we don't mind. No, 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 we don't mind. It isn't nice to shut down Sanders, or sit in on the floor, or to shout a cry of freedom at the hotel and the store. It isn't nice, it isn't nice. You told us once, you told us twice, but if that is freedom's price, we don't mind. No, 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 we don't mind. No, 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 we don't mind. It isn't nice to block the doorway. It isn't nice to go to jail. There are nicer ways to do it, but the nice ways always fail. It isn't nice, it isn't nice. Well, buddy, thanks for your advice. But if that is freedom's price, we don't mind. No, 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 we don't mind.
Well, that's Heidi. And it worked many, many times, as we all know. Next, we'll hear from Gina Petrie, who is currently the Seattle Radical Women organizer. She came to Seattle around 2000 and has been in the organization since 2001, worked with Heidi on a lot of different things. And she's here today to share some of that and to let us know what Heidi has meant to her as one of the younger Radical Women members coming along, and what Heidi's legacy means for the organization. Gina.
Thank you. So when I was preparing my remarks for today, I actually found Heidi's application card for membership in Radical Women. It's from 1973 when she was 20 years old. And I wanted to share what she wrote for her reason for wanting to join. She wrote, "It's the only viable alternative. I realize more and more each day how important it is to be responsible and do something about the shit that's coming down." So even in her application, she was cursing. But I appreciate that. So she knew the answer clearly then. And Heidi's feminism and absolute dedication to building women's leadership, both in Radical Women and society, never wavered. She was tough, and I've always admired her for that. And her joy and genuine concern for others really struck me the moment that I met her. In her years of activism in Radical Women, Heidi organized in the community in many arenas, such as for reproductive justice, for LGBT rights, labor, and the rights of people with disabilities. She was serious about building coalition with other working class women and men to achieve that. Heidi fought for non-discrimination policies when there was a move to roll them back after Clara Fraser, who we heard a little bit about, won her sex and political ideology case against City Light. Heidi helped form and was the co-chair of the ad hoc committee for fair employment and open housing that saved key protections covering political ideology, disability rights, and LGBTQ discrimination. Heidi was a strong advocate of people of color and particularly worked in the Black community in issues such as helping organize the Martin Luther King Day Committee and much more, which we heard about from some of her former co-workers. She was a constant proponent of affirmative action, knowing that she benefited from it and others should too. And as Leith was just referring to, she was a member of the Seattle Organizing Committee for the Million Worker March in Washington, D.C. in 2004. And she was a featured speaker at that event, and I watched the video of her speech in preparing for this too. And she gave a rousing and incredible speech calling for an independent and militant labor movement that breaks with the two-party system. And even in 2004, when she called for socialism, she got rousing applause. She really incorporated theory and education into everything she did, and she would often refer to the document that was mentioned earlier, Women Workers, Spark Plugs of Labor. And she would talk about how, especially the role of women, and especially women of color, in the labor force and the non-traditional trades, and in historically women's jobs. And I remember being inspired by that document when we read it in a Radical Women study group, and to be able to know the authors was even more inspirational. And Heidi didn't just write that down, put it on a shelf, and say, oh, we'll talk about that another time. She always educated about that document and the lessons that were learned from it when labor issues were being discussed. She took very seriously the need to train the next generation of leaders, to know the fighters that we came from and the egalitarian world that we could create. And when I first came around Radical Women and met Heidi, I was a little bit shy. I was a little unsure of myself. I know some people might find that hard to believe, but it's true. But I felt very welcomed by her, and she really urged me to come out of my shell. For instance, she encouraged me to project my voice, to speak clearly, to speak confidently, and to be proud of what I actually had to say. And she would tell me, there's no time for shrinking violets. The world needed me, and they needed women of my generation to really step up. And I will admit that there were times where this terrified me just a little bit, but Heidi helped me believe it. Her passion and faith in feminist leadership drew me in and motivated me to challenge myself. It always impressed me that we had trailblazers like Heidi among our ranks in Radical Women. And if she can break down the barriers, well, then we damn well can make sure they stay down. Yeah. I added a few curse words just for Heidi there. When Heidi was less active in Radical Women activities, I would still often see her here at the hall. And we would talk from time to time about my job at that time in healthcare and how, management was treating us very badly. And she really always encouraged me to get in a union and organize with my coworkers. She always asked about what was Radical Women doing and how was it going. She would reply with words of enthusiasm or words of encouragement for the organizing we were doing or for me as a leader. And when it became harder and harder for her to express herself, she would just simply say, "That's great. That is great." And I could really also see it in her eyes that she cared very deeply about us. What Heidi gave to Radical Women and the next generation of feminist leaders is really invaluable. The time that I spent with her really means a lot to me. And I know that the best way to honor her life and her legacy is to carry on this bold, self-assured, unapologetic activism and finally get rid of this unjust system. And as Heidi said, that is the only viable alternative. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Nellie Wong, a nationally known writer and poet, longtime friend and comrade of Heidi's, and someone who worked with her since the early 1980s. Heidi loved art and music and poetry, and especially Nellie's poetry. And Nellie's going to read for us today a poem she's written called Villanelle for Nellie. I mean, Villanelle for Heidi.
Thank you very much, and I wanted to share a thought I had before I go into the poem for Heidi. And there's a term in the Toisan dialect, in the Chinese dialect called Hoisan or Hoisanese. And my mother was one, as well as many of the Chinese immigrant women who immigrated from China in small villages in China to the United States. And in my case, it was to Oakland, California, where my mother came with my 3 older sisters. And so the women in the community always used to talk to each other loudly across the street, and you can hear all the conversations. And there's a term called Chong Hei Paul, means long-steam women or long-steam grandmothers. And so when Heidi and I would get together, and she would host me in her apartment here in Seattle when I came from San Francisco, I thought we were really of the same club of long-steam women, Chong Hei Paul. So I hope Heidi is still steaming on. This is Villanelle for Heidi. Heidi, tall and strong at the helm of light, steering forward in her inimitable style, with fellow workers in struggle and might. Eyes wide open, sapphire with victory in sight, writing, singing, and marching without denial. Heidi, tall and strong at the helm of light. Intellectual companion and artist in perpetual flight, desiring freedom and equality all the while, with fellow workers in struggle and might. Electrical Trades women forge with power day and night. Crew of female gender sons, feminine wiles. Heidi, tall and strong at the helm of light. With Gary, Stephen, and Suki, familial bright. Leaders in movement, their wings spread and entice. Nuggets of wisdom sparkling in plain sight. Isn't it beautiful, says she, of her watercolor art, never contrite. Tough and tender as Clara's and Gloria's bountiful isles, with fellow workers in struggle and might. And you, dear sister, of revolutionary vigor and height, such elegance you emit in socialist feminist miles. Heidi, tall and strong at the helm of light, with fellow workers in struggle and might.
Thank you, Nellie. Next, we'll hear from Doreen McGrath, who currently works as a web developer at City Light. She was one of the collaborators with Heidi in the circle and in many struggles at City Light. Heidi in the field, Doreen in the building. They raised hell everywhere. She's recently brought a large group of city IT workers into Local 77. Doreen.
Thank you. And it's really wonderful to see so many people from Heidi's life here today, from not just City Light, but from everywhere. And I really am so glad you're all here to be a part of this. Heidi was, to me, a pure friend and comrade and sister. She was always compassionate and tough, as you said, but never moralistic. She was fearless, and she had her shit together. Which I found amazing when I first met her, as a woman who had broken her back from a fall from a light pole, to be that together. She always solved problems, and she was a great strategist. I have many, many memories of Heidi working together at City Light. I've been there 30 years, and where, as people have said, she has definitely left her mark. She was a leader for over 20 years of Circle. As many people have mentioned, I just want to say a little bit about Circle. Circle really took on issues in the days in the 90s, 80s and 90s that weren't popular, especially when you're taking on management at City Light, which has kind of got a historic reputation for being particularly nasty, discriminatory against all people of color, women, lesbian, and gays. The disabled, in very big and small ways, if people have said. She carried on, I think, the principles that Megan talked about, that they learned from Clara in the Electrical Trades Trainee program on how to build solidarity and stick together. And just that carried that on through Circle, which what made Circle so important. We had many great fights, from defending our right to post things on bulletin boards. Things would get torn down, would put them back up. There was even a time when City Light management tried to cover up an attempt by a sexist lineman who tried to throw a female apprentice off a pole. This was a very big incident, and management wanted to cover it up. And Heidi said, forget that. And actually, that's not what Heidi said. Somebody edited me. She said, fuck that. And she leaked it to the press. So if you're ever wondering how that story got to the Seattle Times, it was Heidi Durham. And it shook the utility to its foundations. I remember in Circle meeting Black and Asian apprentices who we defended. I remember office workers coming in who were speaking out on the job and had never, their bosses had never met anybody that would speak up and disagree with management. And they were like, what do we helped defend them. And I think that was one of Circle's legacy in the end, is that we helped defend workers' right to speak and criticize management publicly on and off the job. And that was what Clara Fraser's case when she sued City Light. That's what we won, and we keep that alive at City Light today, and through Circle and to today. And many of the current City Light employees that are here today do that every day. We always have to train management on what free speech really means. Heidi herself stood up and publicly confronted, I counted them, 6 superintendents directly. Gordon Vickery, Joe Ritchie, some of you may remember, Randy Hardy, Roberta Bradley, Gary Zarker, and Jorge Carrasco. She gets credit for getting rid of 4 of them. Heidi taught me to fight for public power as well as workers' rights. That as public employees and Seattle residents, it's our duty to speak out against mismanagement and misuse of public money at council hearings, in the press, wherever we can. Heidi has always had my back in my years at City Light, and one of those times was during my very first union organizing attempt. We were organizing with the Professional and Technical Employees Local 17. I've organized unions at City Light twice, so this was the first one. City management found out we were organizing and threatened me with discipline, and they called Local 17 and complained. And I'm assuming the union's going to have my back. So I attended a lunchtime meet and greet with all the union officials, and after the meeting they called me over, 4 staff members from Local 17, and ambushed me. This was the union ambushing me, letting me know in no uncertain terms that they did not have my back, and they were not going to defend me. I was on my own. I was freaked out. Called Heidi, first thing, I'm in big trouble, management's out to get me, I don't have a union, and the one I'm trying to join is not going to support me, we get together after work, I'm crying, Heidi, what am I going to do? I lost my job, oh my God. She calms me down and works out a great strategy. The next day, a coworker and I grabbed the lead staff rep who was in our organizing committee and said, "Come here, we need to talk to you." And we ambushed her right there in the lobby of the Seattle Municipal Tower, right back. We told her in no uncertain terms that if Local 17 did not defend me, we would take it to the Seattle Times, we would take it, would sue the union. I think we threatened to sue. I don't really remember exactly what we told them, but it was like that. Management to go to hell. And it went away. It was very much like yours, too. It was a great tactic. That was Heidi in big and small ways making a difference, figuring out how to turn the tables and win victories for the working class. And while it's not the only mess she got me out of, Heidi's training helped me to lead those 2 union organizing campaigns and bring me to her union, IBW 77. And let's just say that relationship with 17 never was very good. Heidi made a difference everywhere, and nowhere was it more important, as others have said, is in the Freedom Socialist Party. She embodied every day what it meant to be a socialist feminist, and how not just to have compassion for people that this system has torn down, but to stand up for them and with them. Every time I saw Heidi until she could speak no more, as I think Doug mentioned it, she always asked about the party and how every other one of us was doing. It was such a deep concern to her. She had absorbed it so deeply, I think, because of the large task that we have undertaken to rid the world of capitalism once and for all. That is what we need to do. I think Seattle is a better city. City Light is a better place to work. IBW is a stronger union. And the Freedom Socialist Party is a stronger and better party because of Heidi. So let's live like Heidi, honor her legacy, fight like hell, and bring sanity to this mad, mad profit-making world.
And a few months after I got there, I participated in a mass walkout that lasted for 2 weeks. And at the mass meetings, I listened to the lively talks of Clara Fraser, who as education coordinator, began the training for Heidi and the other electrical trades trainees. And Heidi and the other pioneering women were very courageous. Heidi had undaunted courage. She was a fighter who constantly acted in solidarity with her fellow trainees. Eventually, I collaborated with Heidi in the Committee for Equal Rights at City Light. And when we were discussing tactics, Heidi would sometimes say, one thing I learned from Clara, which would be followed by something that was eminently practical and rooted in the best of socialist feminist thinking. There is a heartbeat in the movement for social change. Heidi learned from Clara Fraser, as indeed all of us who knew Clara did. I certainly learned from Heidi. And I remember Heidi saying to me, I want you to talk to my friend Doreen. My introduction to Doreen McGrath was the start of a long and beneficial collaboration in both Local 17 and Circle. Heidi was a plain-spoken feminist. She spoke the unflinching truth to power, time after time and time again. She was a skeptic without being a cynic. She saw through managers who claimed to be friends of workers, just as she saw through the politicians who claimed to be friends of labor. Mm-hmm. I'm proud to have known and worked with Heidi and proud to claim her as a friend. Thank you.
They eventually, I was the first lineman to work for Puget Sound Power and Energy, and they fired me after 4 years there. And I went to work for City Light a year later. And I heard about this Heidi Durham. I didn't know who she was, because I didn't know I was catching a lot of havoc being who I was. And as it turned out, when I went to work at City Light, I caught less hell than I did being the first lineman in Puget Power, black line Puget Power band. But Heidi came to the rescue. I was telling this young man here, when I met Heidi, man, Heidi was ready to go, huh? And I was already going, but we turned around and did things good. Heidi came to my aid and taking clearances. I couldn't take clearances very well, but she'd come and shoot everybody out that got in my way as I was trying to take my clearances. And we went on, and there was so many things that she did that was really interesting to me. I didn't think I'd never seen no woman like that before. She was strong, and because Megan was there with her, Megan was solid, but she was a good friend too. And so finally we got a black superintendent, whatever you call him. I left City like 21 years ago. First got in there, I helped that black supervisor get that job. So how many people don't ever think that the color has nothing to do with bigotry? It had nothing to do with it, because when I was fired, Heidi testified for me. I had perfect attendance, life-saving award. 3 blacks testified against me. 2 of them were preachers. I back off from the brother when you get from that brother, and you had to watch that brother. And so during, they didn't fire Ms. Durham before then. Ms. Durham had tangled with me. And the ladies that with Doreen McGrath and this lady and Heidi and all that. So she went and fired me on the word of a lineman. That lineman didn't do as I instructed him to do, so she fired me. I like to have my firing high. I fired and retired. But however, what happened is I said, well, it's time to go out to Roberta Palm Bradley now. Heidi was the first and said, well, we'll take her out of here. And you know what? Made some blacks mad. I didn't care, still don't care. We took Roberta Palm Bradley out of there. Black did it. White did it. I'll never forget that. So I'm glad to see now. It look like you guys got a good group of people here. Great group of people here. And by the way, I came out okay after she fired me. Heidi testified for me and I lost it. But let me tell you one case that I did win. I won disability 100%, and then I turned around and got my retirement too. Then,